I 3D printed walls for Frosthaven. They're frozen walls or ice walls. They got little ice crystals coming out of them. I got all kinds of different designs I printed in different shapes, but they go on the tile. I also printed out these tiles, but they're still on the printer. But they go like this. Just some different look. But I'm painting them now. I increased the size too. They were only 20 millimeters tall, and I increased them to 32 millimeters tall, and it made them a little bit thicker, and I like that better because the miniatures on the board are 32 millimeters tall, so I wanted it head height. It shouldn't block the view of the miniatures either. I've started painting on them a little bit. I'm using Beowulf Blue from Speed Paint 2.0 Army Painter.
about his plans to just put his paw down on the Persian's tail and watch what happened. Al Hauk had already secured a table inside Rule of Bula near the window, and he had ordered a pint of Smittix for each of us. I was both pleased and disappointed by the gesture, for it meant I wouldn't get to go to the bar myself and take a whiff of the barmaid. That's not as creepy as it sounds. Granuaile, the red-headed siren behind Rulabula's bar, was not entirely human, but I still didn't know what she was, and her scent was my only clue. She was a mystery to me, and a beautiful one at that. Long locks of curly red hair cascaded over her shoulders, which were always covered in a tight but otherwise chaste t-shirt. She did not earn tips from her cleavage, like many barmaids do, but rather depended on her green eyes, her pouty lips, and the light dusting of freckles on her cheeks. She had pale, creamy skin and a few fine golden hairs on her arms, which led eventually to fingernails she had painted green to match her eyes. She was not one of the Fae. I could see through all their glamours, and in any case she never blanched in my iron amulet. Neither was she undead, or she would hardly be working the day shift. She wasn't aware of any kind, which Hal had mentioned, but I had already determined using my own methods. I had thought she might be a witch, but she didn't have the telltale signs in her aura. If she had been anything sent from hell, I would have smelled the brimstone, but instead she gave off an ineffable scent that was... in with something that reminded me of India, like saffron and poppies. I was left to conclude that she was a goddess of some sort, masking her true nature and slumming here incognito, like so many other members of the supernatural community, displaced from points all over the world. The Bonnie Irish lass facade was even more shameless than mine, for I doubted that she was truly Irish underneath it all. She must be from some foreign pantheon, and I was determined to figure it out without asking her a thing. She flashed a smile at me as I walked in, and my heart sped up a bit. Did she have a clue as to my true nature, or did she only see the dim college kid disguise? Her face fell as I walked past the bar toward Hal's table. "You're not sitting with me today, Atticus," she said with a pout, and I almost changed course right there. "Dumb boy," Oberon said at my heels with ironic relish. I ignored him. "Sorry, Granuaile. That simply could not be her true name. She had to have picked it out on purpose to fit in at an Irish bar. I have to talk a little treason with my friend," I said, gesturing toward Hal. She smiled. "If it's a conspiracy, I want in on it. I can keep a secret." "I'll bet you can," I said, and she arched an eyebrow at me. I felt a foolish grin spread across my face. "Ahem. Time is money, Mr. O'Sullivan," Hal called, and I snapped my head around, suddenly realizing I had stopped in the middle of the bar and forgotten what I was doing there. Hal's time was worth $350 an hour. "Next time you take me to the dog park and you yell at me to stay away from the French poodles, I'm gonna remind you of this," Oberon said. Embarrassed, I stalked over to Hal's table and sat myself across from him. Oberon squeezed underneath the table next to the window and waited for food to rain down from the sky. Hal frowned. "I smell your dog." "He's under the table, camouflaged," I said. Hal's eyes widened as he processed the sling across my chest and the hilt peeking out over my shoulder. "Is that the sword I think it is?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, and took a long pull from the Smittix. "Was it employed in last night's mischief?" "No, but I believe in being prepared. There's more trouble on the way. A whole lot more." "Do I need to tell the pack?" Al asked. "Werewolves. The pack always came first." "Hey, it's my ass in the meat grinder here, not the pack's," I said. "You don't need to tell anyone but Leaf about this business. In fact, I want to see him as soon as he wakes up tonight. Send him to my house. Hal looked as if I had just asked him to lick up vomit. Will you be paying the firm for his time, or will he? He was referring to the business arrangement I had with the vampire. Leaf and I had a unique understanding. Sometimes I paid to mess with him, but I think Leaf was trying to become strong enough to mess with Thor someday. Does it matter? I said. The firm gets paid either way. Our waitress arrived, and we paused to order 3 plates of fish and chips. The third was for Oberon, who was doing a good job of remaining invisible. When she left, Hal spread his hands and said, "Okay, tell me everything." I told him about Flittish, but left out the Morrigan. It wasn't everything, but close enough. "So a goddess from your pantheon is come and gone," he said when I had finished. "And you could get a visit from 2 more Irish gods before this business is through?" "Right. Angus Og and Bress. Plus Furbolgs. Plus those. I've never seen one. What are they like?" "To you they'll look like a biker gang or something similar, but they'll smell like shit." "Biker gangs can smell like shit sometimes." "Well, that just makes the disguise better," I said. "The point is, you won't see what they're really like, because they wear glamour when they walk in the mortal world. In truth, they're giants with bad oral hygiene and a predilection for wielding spears. They used to be an independent people in the old days, but the Tuatha De Danann use them as thugs now." "How much of a threat are they?" "To my life, I'm not particularly worried. I'm more worried about collateral damage than anything else. That will bring the police into it, which I'm sure is the point of sending them. Furbolgs are not renowned for their discretion." Our fish and chips arrived, and I sighed happily. It is life's small, simple pleasures that make it worth living longer than a century or 2. I dropped a piece of cod down to Oberon and covered up his noisy chomping sounds with some noises of my own. "So, how can I keep Oberon from going to animal control?" I asked around a mouthful of chips and beer. Hal shrugged. "The simplest way is to do what you're doing and lie," he replied. "Keep him hidden and tell anyone who asks that he escaped and ran away. In a month, or even less, they'll be so swamped with other cases that they won't be able to keep tabs on whether he's with you or not. Then you'll tell all your neighbors you've given up. You're going to get a new dog, and voila, Oberon reappears. Oh, and I wouldn't go hunting in the Papago Hills for a year or so." Oberon whined at that, and I hushed him by dropping another piece of cod on the floor. "This is all supposing the police actually track him to your place," Hal said. "They haven't shown up yet, have they?" I shook my head. "Not yet, but since I think someone is leading them around, I have no doubt they will show up soon. Now tell me what to do if I don't want to lie." Hal stopped chewing and regarded me steadily for a few seconds. "You don't want to lie?" he said, completely off his guard. "Of course I do. I just want to know what else I can do that I haven't thought of already. That's why I pay you, Hal. I mean, shit, come on." Hal smiled. "You really sound like one of these modern kids. I have no idea how you do it." "Blending in is the best survival skill I have. It's just listening carefully and parroting, really. So tell me what to do if I'm forced to play it honest." "Honest as in the police can see through your camouflage spell and know that Oberon is right in front of them?" "Sure. Pretend I'm an ordinary guy with no magic at my disposal. Then how do I protect Oberon?" The werewolf took a long drink of Smittix and belched discreetly as he thought about it. Then he placed his hands flat on the table and said, "Well, the only way they'd be able to build a case without witnesses is to use DNA matching. Oberon has no rights, but as his owner, you can demand they get a warrant before they do the whole unreasonable search and seizure thing. If they come with a warrant, though, you pretty much have to let them do what they want. And judging from what you told me, if they get a DNA sample from him, the case is pretty solid." "That's right," I said, nodding. "Well, another way we can delay things is to lodge some protest on religious grounds." "How's that?" "You protest against the DNA testing of your dog on the grounds that it's against your religion." I looked at him as if he were trying to sell me the sham wow and the slap chop for only $19.99 plus shipping and handling. My religion has no objection to DNA testing. We didn't know what the hell DNA was in the Iron Age. Hal shrugged. "They don't know that. Neither of us would ever get an award for ethics." "The Iron Age, huh?" Hal had been trying to guess my age for a good while, and I had carelessly given him another clue. I ignored his query and frowned skeptically. Will that argument work? No, the judge will throw it out on the grounds that your dog cannot possibly share your religious views, or something like that. But it will delay things for a good long while. Long enough for you to figure out where to hide Oberon if, as you say in this entirely hypothetical situation, you can't do it magically. Good show, old sod, I said in a cheerful accent straight out of Piccadilly Circus. I knew there was a jolly good solicitor in you somewhere. Oh, bugger off, Hal replied in kind. Just hide and lie and keep it simple for everyone, all right? I grinned at him. Will do. Where's the pack going to run next full moon? In the White Mountains near Greer. Did you want to come along? Occasionally the pack would let Oberon and me run with them, and it was always a good time. The only touchy part was my status within the group, because werewolves are obsessed with status. Magnuson didn't like to have me along because technically he'd have to be submissive to me, if I gave a damn about such things. And alphas aren't comfortable showing any kind of submission in front of their packs. I couldn't blame him, of course, so we worked out a compromise where I was a friend of the pack, a guest on equal footing with every member, essentially outside their hierarchy. And I...
You heard about Akusoli. These are the cutting-edge orthopedic insoles that people...
But it also meant that Hulk, Magnuson, had to be my lawyer. As a second, he was already submissive and did not have to worry about debasing himself by serving my legal needs. I would love to, but it falls around Samhain, and I have some of my own rituals to attend to, I said. I thank you for the offer, though. My pleasure. He extended a hand across the table to me. I shook it and he said, I'll take care of this bill and let Leaf know you want to see him when he wakes for the night. You call me if you need anything else. And stay away from that redheaded bartender. I don't know what she is besides trouble. That's like asking a bee to stay away from flowers. I grinned back at him. Thanks, Hal. Give my regards to the pack. Come on, Oberon. We both rose and headed for the door. Granuaile waved at me and smiled. Come back soon and see me, Atticus, she called. I will, I promised. You don't even know if she really likes you, Oberon said as we exited and I unlocked my bike. She could be doing her customer service routine and stringing you along in hopes of a big tip the next time you come in. With dogs, you just go up and smell their asses, and you know where you stand. It's so much easier. Why can't humans do that? Perhaps if we had a better sense of smell, we would, I said. Nature clearly favored your kind in that regard. When I returned to the store and told Perry he could take off for lunch, Emily the witch was already there waiting for me, drinking a cup of chamomile tea Perry had made for her. He wasn't skilled behind the tea station, but he could boil some water and pour it on top of pre-made sachets as long as I labeled them carefully. Back so soon? I said. You must be eager to begin. True enough, she said. She stood from the table and minced over to me in her affected Barbie doll stride. She waved to check at me before placing it in my hand and saying snarkily, Here's your danger pay. Though there's nothing dangerous about making some tea. I never figured druids would be so avaricious. I took it from her hand and made a show of examining it carefully, because I knew it would annoy her. She deliberately tried to provoke me, and one cannot sass me with impunity. I saw her face flush and knew she wanted to say something about my dilatory manner, but she wisely kept her mouth shut and contained herself to huffing. Eventually I said, This appears to be in order. I will begin your treatment because your coven has done right by me in the past. But if this fails to clear the bank, then of course that will be a breach of contract. Now, that was just unnecessary. Even insulting for me to say, but she was such a snot I felt she deserved it. Fine, she growled out, and I smiled and went behind my counter to begin brewing her tea. I worked in silence for a while. We were the only people in the store, and neither of us was in the mood to make small talk. Oberon picked up on it. Genghis Khan would never put up with so much attitude, he said. You speak the truth, my friend, but I'm as guilty as she is. We're not being very nice to each other. So I gather. But why not? Isn't she the sort of female you normally find attractive? If that was really what she looked like, sure, I said. But in reality, she's probably pushing 90 or so. And besides, I don't trust witches. Do you think she's going to try something? Should I move behind her? No, she knows you're here. She can see through the camouflage. But I think she's hiding something from me, and I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. When did she drop the first shoe? I missed it. Never mind. Just listen. Once she drinks the tea, she will try to surprise me with something. She's waiting for the contract to be fully in effect before she says anything. Well then, give her back the check and send her packing. We don't need to play her witches' games. They always want to get you and your little dog, too. I knew I never should have let you watch The Wizard of Oz. Toto didn't deserve that kind of trauma. He was so tiny. When Emily's tea was finished steeping, I set it on the counter for her.
Poor Toto.
Drink it as is, I said. No sweeteners, and nothing sugary for at least 3 hours afterward. Be careful from this day forward not to eat anything for 3 hours before drinking this tea either. Insulin will interfere with metabolizing the medicinal compounds in the tea. That was complete bunk. I just made that up to mess with her. And it'll take a couple of hours for the results to show up, so don't go hopping into his bed right away. Fine, she said, and she began chugging the tea as if it were an Irish car bomb, completely disregarding the damage the hot liquid might do to her tongue and throat. She really wanted to get this over with. She slammed it down forcefully, as if it were a shot glass instead of a teacup, and she smiled malevolently at me. And now, Druid, now that you have entered into a contract from which you cannot withdraw without severe consequences, I have the pleasure of informing you that the man you're rendering impotent with this brew is none other than Angus Hogue. Chapter 9. Now, that was a pretty good bomb to drop on me. It raised all sorts of questions. Foremost among them, where is Angus Hogue right now? If he was already in town and diddling the local witches to pass the time, then my paranoia was well justified. It meant he was far more directly involved in last night's mischief than I had thought. And it meant something else, which Emily was obviously waiting for me to realize. Providing her with the agent for his humiliation would make Angus Hogue duty-bound to kill me as soon as possible. He would no longer feel comfortable in taking the occasional pot shot at me from a distance. He'd have to actively hunt me down and make me pay. Yep, storm clouds are thrice cursed. First the Fae found out where I was hiding, then my dog killed a human, and now I'd earned the very personal enmity of a god who had been content for centuries to simply let his minions slap me around. Emily wasn't going to get an expression of even mild concern from me, though. She wanted to see terror in my eyes, but I walled that all off and pretended she was talking about someone harmless, like Snuffleupagus or Captain Kangaroo. So you've come to me to make him wilt like lettuce, I said. You could have done the job yourself by shedding that skin and showing him what you really look like. Wow. I couldn't believe I just said that. Her eyes bulged with the offense, and she whipped her right hand toward my face for a slap. Now, a slap from a normal woman I could handle. Heck, I'd suggest I needed one after saying something like that to a regular college kid. But a slap from a witch is simply not permissible, because sure as the moon rises full once a month, she'd use her nails to scrape some skin off my cheek, perhaps even draw some blood, and then she'd have me. A friend of mine fell prey to precisely this sort of trick centuries ago, and it had poisoned me against witches ever since. She had goaded him into saying something rude, slapped him, and left marks on his face. And then that very night his heart exploded inside his chest. I don't mean he had a heart attack. His heart had literally blown apart as if someone had planted explosives in it, long before gunpowder was invented. Some other druids and I had taken him to the grove and done a rudimentary autopsy to see if we could puzzle out why he dropped dead so abruptly. And we found this crater inside his ribcage. That's when I realized he'd been killed the moment she slapped him. I'd never avenged him. The witch got away, and it still stung centuries later. That's why Emily's attempt to slap me got a very violent reaction. I knocked her arm down by crossing my right hand over my face, and I backhanded her really hard, much harder than I should have. I shouldn't have hit her at all. I should have just backed up out of her reach, but I tend to flare up when people try to kill me. which was what she was trying to do, make no mistake. She squealed and staggered back a few steps, holding her nose. I had broken it, and I sort of felt like an asshole, even though she had planned to do much worse to me. While she was still in shock and processing what had happened, I took the opportunity to try to talk her down from escalating it. You offered me violence, and I defended myself. I know that a slap from you would have meant the end of my life, or at least the threat of it, and I could not permit that. And if you're thinking about using magic against me in my own shop, I would remind you that discretion is sometimes the better part of valor. And I would remind you that I am not powerless. Radomiwa will hear of this. That's fine. I'll show her my security tape, I said, gesturing to the video camera mounted on the wall above the register, which clearly shows you swinging first. On top of that, you have now given me cause to believe you are a close associate of an old enemy of mine. I'd be within my rights to treat you as hostile. Go ahead and try something, she challenged, eyes blazing. I don't need to try anything, I chuckled. I'm in control here. You go on thinking you're in control, Druid, she spat, heading for the door in a fury, her flip-flops flapping noisily. You'll soon find out you are very mistaken. See you tomorrow for tea, I waved cheerily as she slammed through my door. Oh, she's gonna want some revenge, Oberon said after the door closed and we were alone. Don't worry about her, I said, grabbing the spoon and moving quickly around the counter.
This bathroom's so musty.
Everybody dance with.
What are you doing? Oberon asked. He followed me out to the floor, curious. I had squatted down on my haunches, examining the carpet. Ah, there we go. I found a droplet of blood on the carpet that hadn't soaked thoroughly into the weave. It was not much, but it would be enough. I scraped it off the surface and walked toward the door, peering through the glass window to see if Emily was visible. She was getting into her car, parked across the street a short distance north, a bright yellow Volkswagen Beetle. She would have to turn over her left shoulder to see me, so I darted outside, telling Oberon I'd return in a moment, and kicked off my sandals. I sank my toes into the same narrow strip of grass that had helped me heal my arm the day before, and I chanted a binding as I drew power from the earth. Emily felt the draw somehow, whipped her head around, and saw me standing there. I showed the spoon to her and smiled. Her mouth dropped open in horror as she realized how careless she had been. I saw her lips move and her brow furrow in concentration, so I had no time to waste. I licked her blood off the spoon and completed the binding just in time. She flicked her fingers at me, and I knew she had just hurled something my way, but all I felt was a gentle breeze. A couple of seconds later, her upper body was thrown painfully forward into her steering wheel, which caused the car's horn to beep. Ha! She had tried to blow the spoon out of my hand and knock me down in the process, off the grass strip and my source of power. Clever, but not fast enough. The binding I had performed was actually a ward, which meant that any spell she sent against me would rebound against her. The only way she could get out of it would be to get herself some new blood. She leaned back slowly and clutched her chest, probably bruised a rib or two. On top of a broken nose and wounded pride, she'd had a rough day visiting the local druid. It made me wonder what she'd been told about me. Did she know how old I was? Did she think I was some sort of lame-ass neo-druid, mucking about with holly branches and mistletoe? She turned around to stare daggers at me, and I gave her a jovial wave, then blew her a kiss. She flipped me off, a gesture that had zero cultural relevance to me, and then started up her Beetle and screeched away toward University Drive. Chuckling to myself, I re-entered the store, and Oberon came over and nuzzled against my legs, which was somewhat startling when he was in camouflage. Nobody's here now. I want to scratch behind the ears. I searched and found his head and gave him a good head rub for a minute or so. Yes, you've been very patient, haven't you? I said. Tell you what, next time we go hunting, we'll head down to the Chiricahua Mountains. That's south of here, and I think you'll like it.
What's down there?
Mule deer. Maybe some of those bighorn sheep if we get lucky.
When can we go?
Probably not until this business is over, I admit it. I know it'll be a long wait for you, but I promise we'll do nothing but hunt once we go. The trip will be for you. But that's not to say you're going to be totally bored in the meantime. You'll probably get attacked at any moment.
Really?
Well, it's more likely going to be after we leave the store. Oberon's ears perked up and he turned to the door.
Someone's coming.
A customer walked in, looking for a copy of the Upanishads. And after that, a fairly steady stream of people were either browsing or buying something. The lunchtime lull was over, and soon enough Perry came back to help out. After giving a regular his customary cup of Daddy's Little Helper, my code for a tea designed to promote prostate health, the phone rang. It was a call from one of Radomiwa's coven.
Mr. O'Sullivan, my name is Marina Sokolowski. May I speak to you about what occurred between you and Emily this afternoon?
Well, sure, but I cannot speak frankly right now. I have customers in the store.
I understand.
She replied. She had a warm voice and a faint accent that had to be Polish, judging by her name.
Let me ask you this. Do you consider the contract between you and Emily to still be in effect?
Oh, absolutely. I nodded as if she could see it. Nothing happened to nullify that.
That is reassuring. Would you mind terribly if I accompanied her for tomorrow's tea?
I suppose that would depend on your intentions.
I will not fence with you.
Melina said.
What was this coven's obsession with fencing? My intention is to defend Emily in case you attack her again.
I see. And according to Emily, how many times have I attacked her so far?
Once physically and once magically.
Well, at least you got that part right. But in both cases, Melina, it was she who initiated the attack. I was able to redirect both attacks against her, hence the injuries you have no doubt seen.
So it's her word against yours?
She sighed. Yes, and I understand that you must take her word against mine. But you must understand that she told me her lover is a sworn enemy of mine. By doing so, she has allied your entire coven with him.
No, that is unthinkable.
Melina objected.
If we were allied with this individual, then we would not be trying to humiliate him.
Why are you trying to humiliate him?
That is a question better answered by Radomiwa.
So put her on. Is she there?
Radomiwa is indisposed.
For normal people, that would mean she was taking a shower or something. In Radomiwa's case, it probably meant she was in the middle of a complicated spell involving tongue of frog, eye of newt, and maybe a packet of Splenda. I see. A customer with greasy black hair hanging over his face came up to the counter with a bulk bag of incense sticks. Look, I have to go. You're welcome to come with Emily tomorrow, but it would be best to counsel her to keep silent around me. I can make her tea in silence, and she can drink it in silence. That way no one will get offended or injured. If you'd like to stay behind afterward, perhaps we can talk without coming to blows. Melina agreed, said she looked forward to it, and we rang off. The greasy man asked me if I had access to medical marijuana as an apothecary, and I pasted a sorrowful expression on my face and told him no as I rang up the incense he needed to mask the stink of his habit. Drug addicts perplex me. They're a relatively recent development, historically speaking. Everyone has their theories. Monotheists like to blame it on godlessness. But I think it was a plague that developed in the sooty petticoats of the Industrial Revolution and its concomitant division of labor. Once people specialized their labors and separated themselves from food production and the daily needs of basic survival, there was a hollow place in their lives that they did not know how to fill. Most people found healthy ways to fill it, with hobbies or social clubs, or pseudo-sports like shuffleboard and tiddlywinks. Others didn't. Perry finally found some time to mess around with the tarot decks and had a serviceable display up by closing time. I rode quickly to the widow's house after locking up the store and retrieved the push mower from her shed in the backyard.
Ah, you're a fine boy, Atticus, and that's no lie.
She said, saluting me with her whiskey glass as she came out to the front porch to watch me work. She liked to sit in a rocking chair and sing old Irish songs to me, old for her anyway, over the whirl of the lawnmower blades. Sometimes she would forget the words and simply hum the tune, and I enjoyed that just as much. When I was finished, I always spent a pleasant time with her, hearing stories of her younger days in the old country. That day, as the sun was setting and the shadows were lengthening, she was telling me something about running around the streets of Dublin with a bunch of ne'er-do-wells.
This was all before I met me husband, of course.
She made sure to add. I had Oberon stationed as sentinel on the edge of the lawn close to the street. As the widow regaled me with tales of her golden age debauchery, I was depending on him to tell me of approaching danger.
Atticus,
He said, as the widow was winding up her tale with a sigh over better days in a better land.
someone comes on foot from the north.
Is he a stranger? I had put Fragara aside while I talked to the widow, but now I stood and slung the scabbard back over my head, causing the widow to frown.
Yes, he is very strange. I can smell the ocean on him from here.
Uh-oh, that's not good. Stay still and try not to make any noise. Excuse me, Mrs. McDonough, I said. Someone's coming and he might not be friendly.
What? Who is it? Atticus?
I couldn't answer yet, so I didn't. I kicked off my sandals and drew power from the widow's lawn even as I walked toward the street and peered northward. One of the charms on my necklace has the shape of a bear on it, and its function is to store a bit of magical power for me that I can tap when I'm walking on concrete or asphalt. I topped off the magical tank as a possible antagonist approached. A tall, armored figure clanked noisily on the asphalt a couple of houses away, and it raised a hand to hail me when I came into view. I activated a different charm that I call fairy specs, a sort of filter for my eyes that lets me see through fey glamours and detect all sorts of magic juju. It showed me the normal spectrum, but then there was also a green overlay that revealed what was going on magically, and right now the two layers showed me the same thing, so whoever he was, I was looking at his true form. If he had something similar to my fairy specs, he might be able to see through.
Power Homeschool, the leader in providing online lessons to families.
Then again, he might not. He was wearing rather gaudy bronze armor that no one would have worn in the old days. The cuirass, faced in hardened leather dyed with woad, covered too much and restricted movement. He had leaf-shaped tassets hanging down over a bronze mail skirt. He also had 5-piece pauldrons and matching vambraces and greaves. It would have been hot enough to wear such armor in Ireland, but here the temperature was still in the low 90s, and he must have been broiling in it. His helmet was beyond ridiculous. It was one of those medieval barbutes that didn't become popular until 1,000 years after his halcyon days of slaughter, and he must have been wearing it as a joke, for I did not find it especially funny. A sword hung in a scabbard at his side, but thankfully he did not carry a shield.
I greet you, Siohan O'Sullivan,
He said.
well met.
He flashed a smug grin at me through his helmet, and I wanted to slay him on the spot. I kept my fairy specs on because I simply didn't trust him. Without some way to pierce his glamour, he could make my eyes think he was standing 3 feet away with his hands on his head, while he was really plunging a dagger into my belly. Call me Atticus. I greet you, Bress.
Not well met?
He tilted his head a bit to the right, as much as the barbute would let him. Let's see how the meeting goes. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, and I wouldn't have minded if it were longer. And by the way, the Renaissance Festival doesn't arrive here until next February.
That's not very hospitable.
Bress said, frowning. Oberon was right. He smelled of salt and fish. As a god of agriculture, he should smell of earth and flowers, but instead he retained the stink of the dockside, owing perhaps to his Fomorian ancestors who lived by the sea.
I could take offense if I wished.
The thing had already begun. Can't imagine why else you would be here now,
I am here at the request of an old friend.
he said. Did he request that you dress like that? Because if he did, he's not your friend.
Atticus, who is that?
The widow McDonough called from her porch. I didn't take my eyes off Bress as I called back to her. Someone I know. He won't be staying long. Time to set up my flanking maneuver. Speaking mind to mind, I said to Oberon, remain still, but when I say get behind him, grab a leg and just yank him off his feet. Once he's down, jump clear. Got it, Oberon said. Bress continued as if the widow had never spoken. Angus Ode wants the sword. Give it to me and you'll be left alone. It's that simple. Why isn't he here himself? He's nearby, Bress said. That was calculated to ratchet my paranoia up a few levels. It worked, but I was determined it would not work in his favor. What's your stake in this, Bress? And what's with the armor? That does not concern you, Druid. Your only concern is whether you will agree to give us the sword and live, or refuse and die. The last fingers of the sun were waving goodbye over the horizon, and twilight was upon us. Fairy time. Tell me why he wants it, I said. It's not like Ireland has a high king who needs the Tuatha De Danann to help him out uniting all the various tribes. It is not for you to question. Sure it is, I said. But I guess it's not for you to answer. Fragora is right here. I gestured to the hilt peeking over my shoulder. So if I give it to you now, you walk away, and I never hear from you or Angus again? Bress peered intently at the hilt for a few moments, then chuckled. That is not Fragora. I have seen it, Druid, and I have felt its magic. You have nothing in that scabbard but an ordinary sword. Wow. Radomiwa's magical cloak just rocked. And then the green overlay in my vision started to differ from the normal spectrum. Bress was pulling his sword out of his scabbard in a leisurely fashion and watching my face to see if I reacted, so I tried to stay relaxed and let him think I was clueless. Either he knew that I really had Fragora on my back and he wanted to double-cross me, or he simply wanted to kill me to burnish his reputation. He'd make a fine tale of the battle, no doubt, in spite of the fact that he was planning the equivalent of a stab in the back. I assure you it's the real thing, I said to him. And to Oberon I said, change in plan. Just lie down behind him when I say, I'll push him over your back so he falls down. Okay. Bress's glamour form shrugged and said, you can give your cheap sword to me if you'd like. It'll only delay things, and I'll have to come back again with another offer. But I can guarantee that offer won't be as generous as the one I'm giving you now. And that was when the true Bress on the green overlay grinned wickedly and raised his sword over his head in a two-handed grasp, ready to split me in two. Now, Oberon, I said, keeping my face pensive as if I were thinking over Bress's words. I started talking out loud to hopefully mask any sounds Oberon made as he moved. Bress, I think you're missing something important, I said, even as he brought his sword down with all his strength, and I stepped out of the way to the right at the last instant. His glamour persona was still standing there smirking, but I didn't pay attention to that one anymore. The green one, the real Bress, had just tried to slay me. While he was hunched over awkwardly on his follow-through, I kicked at the nerve cluster in his wrist to make him drop the sword, then put another one in his face to make him stand back up. It didn't get through his helmet, but any blow to the head is going to make you pull away. Then I pivoted on my left foot and spun clockwise, delivering a roundhouse into his solar plexus before he could set himself. He staggered backward and fell over Oberon in a tremendous clatter of bronze and hardened leather, still not hurt, but pretty humiliated by this point. He gave up on the glamour, and the smirking Bress merged with the one on the ground, so that my fairy specs and my normal vision showed the same thing again. I could have left it there. He was disarmed and no danger to me now, and if any of the Fae had been around to see him fall flat on his ass, he would be shamed in a legendary fashion. Except that he had tried to kill me with a glamour. He would never fight me fairly because he could not win that way. He'd never been much of a terror on the battlefield. If I let him live, then he would send a series of assassins my way, just as Angus Oak had been doing for centuries. I didn't need twice the headache I already had. Plus, in the parlance of our times, he was a douchebag. So I didn't leave it there. While he was still on the ground, I whipped Fragora out of its scabbard and plunged it straight through the center of his bronze cuirass, which offered no resistance to the magical blade. Bress's eyes bulged, and he stared at me in disbelief. After surviving the epic battle with ancient Ireland, his respectable armor, during which he could have died heroically, he was going to meet his end in a fight that lasted less than 10 seconds because of his own overconfidence. I didn't gloat over it, because that's how people get cursed. I yanked Fragora out of him quickly, causing him to gasp in pain, and then I brought the sword down on his neck, severing his head before he could utter a death curse against me.
When he said to give him the sword, I don't think he meant for you to stick it in his guts.
Oberon said. He took a swipe at me with his sword. I replied.
He did? Well, I didn't see that.
He didn't see you either. Well done.
You killed him.
I heard a tiny voice say. I turned to see the widow standing up, whiskey glass trembling in her hand before it slipped out and shattered on her porch.
You killed him.
Her voice quavered.
Are you going to kill me too now? Send me home to the Lord so I can be with me Sean.
No, Mrs. McDonough, no, of course not. I resheathed Fragora to remove the thread it represented, even though the blade wasn't clean. I have no reason to kill you.
I'm a witness to your crime.
It wasn't a crime. I had to kill him. It was self-defense.
But it looked like self-defense to me,
she said.
You kicked him and pushed him and then you stabbed him and cut off his head.
I don't think you saw the whole thing, I replied, shaking my head, because I was partially blocking your view. He tried to stab me with his sword. See it lying there on the ground? I didn't pull that out of its scabbard. He did. I stayed where I was and let her process it. When someone thinks you might kill them, the last thing you want to do is edge closer to them in an attempt to comfort them. But people always seem to do it in the movies. The widow squinted at the dim outline of the sword, and I watched the doubt seep into her expression.
I thought I heard him threaten you,
she said.
but I didn't see him move until you kicked him. Who was he? What did he want?
He's an old enemy of mine, I began, and the widow interrupted.
Old enemy? Aren't you only 21? How old could your enemies be?
Gods below, she really had no idea. He was old in the way I see things, I said. And then I thought of a story to tell her. He was really an old enemy of my father's, so he's been my enemy from the day I was born, if you see what I mean. And after...
You meet up with people that helped me fight through the centuries in Scandinavia.
became the target instead. That's why I moved here, you know, to get away from him.
This stuff's really stinks. I don't know why it stinks so bad, but that's why I'm always sniffing and stuff. It's very strong. Let me turn the fan on.
I grinned at her, because I'm Irish, Mrs. McDonough, and I'm your friend. I modulated my expression to earnest pleading and clasped my hands together. Please, you have to believe me, I had to kill him or be killed myself. And I hope you know that I would never, ever hurt you. She was still unconvinced, but was wavering. She asked. I couldn't fabricate a plausible lie on the spot, so I told her a part of the truth. It was about this sword, actually, I said, jerking my thumb back to the hilt. Jaw stole it from him long ago, but in a way it's more like he brought it home. It's an Irish sword, you know, but this bloke had it in his private collection, and it didn't seem right, him being British and all.
He's British?
Aye. I felt ashamed for pushing the widow's buttons like this, but I couldn't afford to keep talking all night with a decapitated body in the street. Her husband had been in the provost during the Troubles and was killed by the UBF, whom the widow had always assumed, rightly or not, to be puppets of the British.
Well, then you can bury the bastard in the backyard and cut down the Queen and all her hellish minions.
Amen, I said, and thank you.
Not at all, my boy.
The widow said, and then she laughed.
You know what Miss Sean used to say, God rest his soul? He said, a friend will help you move, Katie, but a really good friend will help you move a body.
She cackled hoarsely and clapped her hands together. Not that I can help you move a big bugger like that. Do you know where the shovel is? Aye, that I do. I wonder, Mrs. McDonough, if you would have some lemonade or something in the house? I have a feeling I'll need it.
Oh, sure, me boy. I can whip something up. You just get busy and I'll come out with a glass.
Thank you so much. As she disappeared inside, I turned back to Oberon, who was still in camouflage. Think you can carry the head back to the backyard? We need to get this out of sight. Night had fallen, but the street lamps were coming on, and anyone driving down the street would see a slight problem in their headlights.
You must have grabbed onto it, that helmet on. I guess I could nudge it along with my nose.
Good enough, I said. As I bent down to pick up the body, and Oberon began playing the macabre game of snout soccer, the battle crow showed up. It took one look at the carnage and squawked angrily at me.
I know.
I said in an urgent whisper.
I'm in deep trouble. If you will follow me to the backyard, we should be able to speak privately there.
The crow squawked once more before launching itself into the air and flapping over the roof. I hauled Bress off the street and slung him over my shoulder in a fireman's carry. I felt his blood oozing through the back of my shirt, but that would burn it. When I got to the backyard, the Morrigan was already in human form, standing pale and silent with her hands on her hips. Her eyes were glowing. This wasn't going to be a nice chat.
When I agreed to your immortality, that did not give you permission to kill the Tuatha De Danann.
She spat. Surely I don't need permission to defend myself, I asked. He tried to use his glamour to cut me down, Morrigan. If I hadn't been wearing my necklace, I never would have seen the sword he pulled on me.
You would have survived,
the Morrigan pointed out. Aye, but in what condition? Forgive me if I did not wish to experiment with various levels of pain and disembowelment, I said as I lowered my shoulder and let Bress fall unceremoniously onto the widow's Bermuda grass.
Tell me precisely what happened, every word that passed between you.
I told her, and she regarded me with stony silence, except for those red eyes. They finally dimmed when I told of how I had used a camouflaged dog to trip him and finish him off.
Well, that was unforgivably arrogant of him. He deserved to die a fool's death, she said. And look at that horrendous armor.
But then she looked at his head resting a yard to the right, and her eyes blazed red again.
When Bridget hears of this, she will want me to bring her your head, and I will have to tell her no. Do you know what position that puts me in, Druid?
I'm sorry, Morrigan, but perhaps if you tell Bridget precisely how he died, she'll be less inclined to demand blood for blood. Think of your own reaction to it. His death was the most dishonorable of any of the Tuatha De Danann. And why was he doing Angus's bidding anyway? Demanding restitution for one such as he would be almost ridiculous. Her eyes cooled down as she considered my words.
You reason well. Perhaps we can avoid conflict if we present it to her properly.
She looked again at Bress's headless body and his head sitting at Oberon's feet.
Leave the body with me,
she said.
I will take care of it.
I was only too glad to let her. My thanks. If you have no objection, I'll go wash the blood out of the street.
No, go ahead.
The Morrigan flicked her hand dismissively, her eyes still on the body, and I took off before she changed her mind. Besides, I honestly didn't want to see what she was going to do. I grabbed the garden hose attached to the front of the house and turned it on full blast. The widow came out with a glass of lemonade for me and a fresh whiskey for herself, surprised to see me back so soon.
Have you buried the feckin' tea bag already?
She said. No, I admitted, and tried to cover my shock at the widow's language. I just came back to wash the blood out of the street.
Ah, well then I'll leave you to it,
she said, handing me the glass and patting me gently on the arm.
I think it's time for Wheel of Fortune, you know.
Good night, Mrs. McDonough. She swayed a bit as she searched for the door handle.
You're a good lad, Atticus. Mowing the lawn and killing what Brits cover up.
Think nothing of it, please, I said. And it's probably best if we kept this between us.
Of course,
she said, finally finding the door and yanking it open.
Good night.
As the door closed behind her, Oberon said,
You know, I think the television might have desensitized her to violence.
That or living in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, I said.
What are the troubles about?
Freedom, religion, power, the usual. Mind standing sentinel again on the edge of the law to do this?
No problem.
I took out Fragorov first to hose it down, then pointed spray at the street to wash the worst of the gore away. I was just about finished when I heard Oberon's voice in my head, sounding very tense.
Hey, you said to listen for heavy footsteps. Well, I hear a whole bunch of them, and I think they're coming this way.
Chapter 10. Time to go home, I said, throwing down the hose and scrambling back to turn off the water. I hopped onto my bike and told Oberon we were going full tilt. I had to get away from the widow's house, or she could become a casualty.
What's making that noise?
He asked, his long stride keeping pace with my bike as I pumped furiously to get some speed.
Those are the furbolgs.
I told him in my mind, saving my breath for bike riding.
I think they sped up. They're running now.
They've spotted us. Don't look back. Keep going. Now listen. These guys carry spears, but you won't see.
I'm using, I'm gonna put a top on it so I don't spill it everywhere. I'm using a blue ink as a filter. Amsterdam. It's fairly dark. But it has a deep stain, so it'll really flow into everything. I didn't get the best coverage, I don't think, so. It'll do a filter on it all. So I plan to go over the walls with this once I've done that filter on both sides and the top, and leave the crystals that color. That's my plan, so we'll see how that goes. Let it dry. Um, so I dry brushed with this light blue gray. It's Hero Blue from Fantasy Games, Scale 75. And now I'm dry brushing with Jade Green from Vallejo Game Color. Oops.
Slowing down wasn't the same thing as stopping. Go, Oberon. Good hunting. He loped away, and I drew power from my front lawn, exulting in the feeling as it coursed through my cells after channeling through my ancient tattoos. The intricate knotwork traveled from the sole of my right foot up the outside of my ankle and right side until it snaked over my right pectoral muscles and around to the top of my shoulder, where it fell like an indigo waterfall to the middle of my biceps. There it looped around 5 times until it threaded down my forearm, ending, if Celtic knots can be said to end at all, in a loop on the back of my hand. The tattoos were bound to me in the most intimate way possible, and through them I had access to all the power of the earth, all the power I would ever need, so long as my bare foot touched the ground. In practice, that meant I would never ever tire in battle. I suffered no fatigue at all, and if I needed it, I'd whip up a binding or two against my enemies, or summon up a temporary burst of strength that would allow me to wrestle a bear. It had been a long, long time since I had felt the need to summon so much power. But then again, I hadn't been in a scrap like this since I'd waded into the mosh pit at a Pantera concert. 9 furbolgs, well, 8 now, were a few more than I had been expecting. I moved to put my mesquite tree behind my back as an obstacle in case any of them were thinking about surrounding me. Then I pointed my finger at the first furbolg to set foot on my lawn and said, "Kani," literally hold or detain, and the earth moved to do my will. It gave way and then reformed around the furbolg's feet, rooting him abruptly and very firmly to the spot. To say he was surprised would be putting it mildly. With so much forward momentum, his bones had no choice but to break above the ankle when his feet were suddenly and inflexibly held in place. The bones ripped out through the back of his calf, and he flopped face down in front of me, sans feet and screaming. That was not the way I had envisioned things working out. I had hoped he would brace himself, keep his feet, and serve as a wall between me and the fellows behind him. No such luck. His buddies kept coming, enraged rather than cautioned by their comrade's fall, and I now had to deal with 3 spears thrusting at my vitals. Real fights don't look as pretty as the ones you see in movies. Those are choreographed, especially the martial arts ones, to seem so beautiful that they are practically dances. In true combat, you don't pause, pose, and preen. You just try to kill the other guy before he kills you. And winning ugly is still winning. That's what Bress failed to understand, and that's why I got rid of him so easily. Furbolgs have none of that pretentiousness. Even if they did, they would have lost it quickly after seeing Leaf take down their leader in the street, and then another one lose his feet in my lawn. No, these lads were betting that I wouldn't be able to dodge 3 spears thrust at me from a height from 3 different angles. I might be able to deflect one and dodge another, but the third one would get me. If I jumped straight up or back, I'd get tangled up with my own mesquite tree. If I rolled forward beneath their thrusts, they'd just stomp on my dumb ass. I was guessing these guys were pushing 600 pounds, so I didn't want to be in the middle of their clog dance. That meant I had less than a second to do some impossible shit. The ones on the left and the center had solid footing for their thrusts, but the one on the right had to plant his foot squarely on the back of his fallen, screaming, footless friend. So that was the one I was willing to take my chances with. I leapt to the left, leaving the ground, which they obviously did not expect. Since the lad on the right was out of reach, I slashed at the spearheads of the other 2 and was gratified to see Fragorok cleave through them easily. But it was too easy. The cut was so clean that while the heads careened off at an angle, the shafts continued on course, and so both of them caught me full force, one in the shoulder, one in the gut. They threw me backward to crack my back painfully against the trunk of my mesquite tree, and I had been planning such a graceful tuck and roll too. The furbolg on the right had missed completely, his thrust stabbing the air where I had been, but he was stepping off his screaming friend's back and preparing for another thrust. "Kani," I said, pointing at him, and he unexpectedly found himself immobile. While he tried to figure out what to do about his captured feet, I returned my attention to the first 2 giants, who were now holding long wooden staves. I assumed that the other 4 furbolgs were anxious to get at me too, but perhaps Leaf and Oberon were keeping them busy. I saw nothing beyond my own personal battle. The one who'd been the center attacker decided to steal the spear of his footless friend, since he wasn't doing anything except bleeding to death. As he bent down to retrieve it, the one on the left decided he would try playing golf with my head. Well, that was easy enough to deal with. I held out Fragora in the path of his swing, and then I was able to spend a couple of seconds concentrating on the pain my tumble had caused. The blow to my shoulder had deeply bruised the muscle, and it wouldn't be much use until I healed it. The shot to my abdomen was much more serious. It had penetrated, though not through to the intestines, and I was bleeding freely. As for my back, I was damn lucky I had not broken it. It was probably a chiropractor's wet dream, as it was. I wished I could do one of those ridiculous fairy godmother routines, where you just wave a wand and some sparkly lights fill your vision and then everything is all better. But my magic doesn't work like that. I can start the healing process and accelerate it, and I can force my body to ignore pain, but I cannot simply make damage disappear. So I did what I could in 2 seconds. I activated the healing charm on my necklace, which blocked pain and put me firmly on the mend, and then I had to move. Golf Boy was getting ready to take another swing, his first one shortened a foot or so by Froggerot. The lad from the center now had his footless mate's spear and was ready to skewer me with it. The immobilized one had decided to throw his spear at me, off balance though he might be. It was time to take the offensive. I gathered myself into a crouch and then leapt, but this one was more like leaps. I put some earth power behind it, so I was fairly launching myself at the furbolgs who would be Phil Nicholson. He saw my intent and raised his shield, but that was what I was counting on. I slashed down from right to left and followed through as I arrived, cutting cleanly through both his shield and his skull before crashing my right shoulder into the remainder of his shield and sliding back down to the earth with his crumpling body. The furbolgs get my highest marks for battle savagery. The slain giant's fellows spared him not a single thought, but only looked for vulnerabilities my attack might have exposed. I had to whip Froggerot back up across my body to deflect a thrown spear from the immobilized one, then back down to neutralize the thrust of the other. "Kami!" I said once more, and now the latter was frozen in place too. I could safely move away to confront other threats and come back to finish them off later. Another of the furbolgs had tried to flank me, but in doing so he had strayed too close to my house and activated the wards. He was busy fighting off some tangling bougainvillea vines that were trying to bring him to ground, and he wasn't enjoying the thorns. I spun around to the street, trying to get some perspective on the remaining foes, and saw that 2 more were down in the street. One was dismembered, and another had leaf attached to his neck and drinking deeply. There was one more, and this one was spinning around clumsily, counterclockwise, and stabbing at the ground at something unseen. It was Oberon, harrying the furbolg's legs. I could not bear it if my friend was lost, so I sprang to help. I lopped off the giant's spear arm at the elbow the next time he spun around, and then I thrust Froggerot underneath his ribs to end it. "Thanks," Oberon said as the giant fell heavily into the street. "They have tougher skin than I thought. All I was able to do was tick them off." "That was enough, my friend. Stay here while I take care of the stragglers." I cast camouflage on myself and my sword, and then I crept up behind the 2 immobilized furbolgs.
No living being should ever eat processed food for every single meal of their life.
Cowardly? Nah. Tell you what, let's debate the meaning of honor and see who lives longer. The last furbolg died in a mess of vines and blood, and only then did I relax the bindings of my lawn, allowing the earth to spit the giant's feet back up. I dropped my camouflage and swept the area with my eyes and my other senses, looking for additional threats. But all I saw were 9 massive corpses and a whole lot of blood. The furbolg's glamours had died with them, leaving me with a colossal cleanup. "Pay you 1 tonight for your firm and the other 2 tomorrow night?" I asked. "Why not simply give them all to me tonight?" Leaf replied. "You heal rapidly." "Well, that's what I'm doing right now," I said. "I have some torn abdominal muscles, a deeply bruised left shoulder, and a couple of vertebrae are out of place." "Should you not be screaming in pain then?" Leaf regarded me skeptically. "Yes, but I've blocked my pain receptors, and I'm going to need my strength if I want to be good as new by morning." "What are the odds of you surviving until morning?" "I think they're excellent. I was warned about the arrival of Bress and the furbolgs, and both have now been dispatched." "Bress is dead? The former king of the Tuatha De Danann?" Manon and McAleer take me for a fool. I shouldn't have told him that. It was too late to backpedal, though. If I lied, he'd know it. Aye, he lost his head up the street moments before I arrived. And you didn't? Guilty. Then I want all 3 glasses tonight, Atticus. And to hell with your healing. Briet is going to kill you, and this will be my last drink. I sighed heavily in defeat. I was not about to explain the details of my arrangement with the Morrigan to him. We wait for Officer Benton to leave, I said. Then you make your calls and we haul the bodies over to the park. Only after I'm in the clear and my front yard can pass inspection without camouflage will you get your rare vintage. Agreed, the vampire said. I'm full right now anyway. I need to work some of this off. He dug a cell phone out of his, or I should say my, breast pocket, and used a speed dial number to call someone named Antoine. I have dinner for the whole crew at Mitchell Park in Tempe right now. Bring the truck. Yes, there's enough for everybody. Trust me. See you there. Whoa. He had ghouls on speed dial. My lawyer kicks so much ass. Chapter 12. Oh. Yeah. Oh. I woke in my backyard stiff from a night spent on the ground and itchy from the grass. Oberon was nestled around my legs, his head resting on my shin. I tried to gently extricate myself so he could continue sleeping if he wished. The night outside had been necessary to speed my healing, especially after surrendering 3 wine glasses of blood for Leaf. I needed the contact with the ground and the power of the earth. Worth a bit of itching, definitely. I sat up and checked my abdomen. Some stiffness there, no real pain, and the skin had already scabbed over and fallen off, showing me a shiny new pink epidermis. The shoulder was good as new, and my back, while still a bit sore, at least felt like it was straight again. I grinned. After 2,100 years, I still thought magic was pretty damn cool. Oberon picked up his head as I got to my feet, and he took that as his cue to stand and stretch. Morning, Agnes. Morning. You want a belly rub? Or take it while I'm offering. Okay. He promptly flopped down next to me, lifting his front paws to give me better access. I squatted down and rubbed him vigorously for a few minutes while his tail thumped happily against my leg. So, what would you like for breakfast today? Sausage. You always say that. That's because it's always tasty. I'm out of sausage. How about some pork chops? Oh, I don't know. Did Genghis Khan eat pork chops? Well, I doubt he ate chops, because that's a fairly modern way to cut it. He probably ate slices off a whole ham or something that they had roasted in the ground all day. Can I have some of that then? I don't have a whole pig to roast, nor do I have the time to do it properly. Can we settle for some chops and just pretend? Oh, right. But after that, can we conquer Siberia or something? Not today, Oberon. I chuckled. I have a contract to fulfill with the witches, and someone is bound to come by and threaten me today, or try to kill me. And we have to make sure the widow is okay. We left her house rather abruptly last night. I rose from my haunches and brushed the grass off my shorts. Come on, let's go inside and make breakfast. All right, but I think we should start recruiting a horde now and have them muster on the Mongolian steppes. We can join them in the spring and then ride to glory. Where are we going to recruit a horde? I asked him as we stepped inside. Froggerah was lying where I left it on the kitchen table. Well, I don't know. You're the bloody druid here, not me. But I think you should start with getting me a sufficient number of French poodles, and you can find those in the classified section of the newspaper. Hold on, I'll go get it. No, don't go out there, I said. You're still in hiding, remember? I'll go get it. I wanted to see what could be seen in the daylight anyway. I dissolved the camouflage bindings on my lawn to evaluate the signature of last night's carnage. There were some messy patches of gore we had missed last night, especially on the eastern side. I pulled out the garden hose to see how much of it I could spray away. Most of it obligingly melted into the soil under a jet stream, but some of the grass remained tinted an unhealthy shade of pink. That was a problem I couldn't simply camouflage away, because the only thing around the pink grass was more pink grass. I'd have to come up with an excuse if anyone asked. Maybe that giant animated jar of Kool-Aid met its untimely end here. Other than pinkness, there was no evidence of the violent demise of 9 very large creatures. I scooped my newspaper off the driveway and returned to the house, where Oberon was waiting with his tail wagging.
Any French poodles for sale?
He asked hopefully. I haven't had a chance to look yet. I laughed. We discussed the logistics and supply we'd need for our invasion of Siberia as I made a pot of coffee for us and 2 separate entrees, a skillet full of chops and melted butter for Oberon, and a cheese and chive omelet for myself. I also toasted a slice of whole wheat bread and slathered it with butter and blackberry preserves. It was domestic bliss there for a while, with the sound of our breakfast cooking, morning doves cooing in the backyard, and a conversation that was little more than an exercise in silliness. Oberon's ability to distract me from life's worries was one of the reasons I adored him. But then I sat down at the kitchen table with my food and looked at the newspaper, and the worries came back. There was a follow-up story on the death of the ranger. The headline said, "Ranger death caused by canine," and the subhead said, "Police following several leads." The food I had been intent on savoring got shoveled into my mouth mechanically as I read. Phoenix. Lab reports revealed that the death of Phoenix Park Ranger Alberto Flores was caused by a canine and not by a knife wound as originally believed. Dr. Eric Mellon, Maricopa County coroner, discovered that Flores' throat wounds bore signs of tearing associated with teeth. DNA tests on samples collected from the wound detected the presence of canine saliva. That evidence, along with several dog hairs found underneath Flores' fingernails and other clues, according to Phoenix detective Carlos Jimenez, have led police to believe that he was attacked and killed by a large dog, possibly an Irish wolfhound. They got that lab report back awfully fast, I said aloud, and Oberon asked me,
Got Domino's rewards points? Now you can redeem them for so much more. You might even have free food.
silently, "Don't make a sound or do anything to indicate you're here. I'm going to camouflage you again." And then 4 sharp knocks echoed through the house. I quickly cast camouflage on Oberon before walking noisily to the front door. Pausing to look through the keyhole, I saw 2 men standing there in shirts and ties. I turned on my fairy specs, but there was nothing to see. They were humans then, either cops or missionaries. Since it was Sunday morning and all the missionaries would be on their way to church, I was betting on cops. I opened the door and stepped out quickly, taking them by surprise and forcing them to step back a little bit. I closed the door behind me and smiled winningly at them. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said. "How may I help you?" I kept my hands in plain sight at my sides, doing my best to appear friendly and harmless. I also stepped a bit to the left so that they would be facing away from the pink grass. The cop to my right wore a blue shirt with a striped tie in navy and white. He wore a jacket to conceal his firearm, certainly not to keep warm, and I got the feeling he would rather walk around with his gun in plain view. He was Latino, looked to be in his mid-30s, and carried a bit of extra gravity in his jowls. On the left was the lad assigned to look dumber and meaner. He was going for a Michael Madsen attitude, wearing polarized sunglasses and leaning against my porch railing with his arms crossed. I guessed he wouldn't be talking much. He was even younger than the other guy and wore a white shirt and skinny black tie, no jacket, like a refugee from a Tarantino film. He was scowling at me because I had stepped out onto the porch before they could ask to come in, which took away one of their primary methods for putting me on the defensive. If they can force you to run around playing the host, then they get a chance to snoop while you serve them. The Latino guy answered me, as expected. Mr. Atticus O'Sullivan? The same. I'm Detective Carlos Jimenez from the Phoenix Police, and this is Detective Darren Fagles from the Tempe Police. May we speak to you inside? Ha! He asked to come inside anyway. Not gonna happen, buddy. Oh, it's such a nice morning. Let's just talk out here, I said. What brings you to my door today? Jimenez frowned. Mr. O'Sullivan, this is really best discussed in private. We're plenty private right here, I grinned at him. Unless you're planning to shout. You aren't going to shout at me, are you? Well, no, the detective admitted. Great. So why are you here? Resigned, Detective Jimenez finally got to the point. Do you own an Irish wolfhound, Mr. O'Sullivan? Nope. Animal Control says you have one licensed under the name of Oberon. That's true, I do. Well done, sir. So then you do own one? No. He ran away last week. I have no idea where he is. So, where is he? Didn't I just say I have no idea? Detective Jimenez sighed and pulled out a notebook and a ballpoint pen. When precisely did he run away? Last Sunday. That would be a week ago, as I said. I came home from work and he was gone. What time was that? 5:15 p.m. Time to play the bewildered citizen. Why are you asking about my dog? Jimenez ignored my question and asked me another one. When did you leave for work that day? At 9:30. And where do you work? At Third Eye Books on Ash Avenue, just south of University. Where were you on Friday night? I was here at home. Was anyone with you? Well, that can hardly be any of your business. It's precisely my business, Mr. O'Sullivan. Oh, are you going to tell me what this is about now? We are investigating a murder committed Friday night in Papago Park. I frowned and squinted at him. Am I a suspect? I didn't do it. Do you have an alibi? I wasn't in Papago Park Friday night. Isn't it supposed to be closed at night? Who saw you Friday night? No one. I was home alone reading. With your dog? No, not with my dog. He ran away last Sunday, remember? You wrote it down in your little book. Would you mind if we verify that your dog is not at home? How do you mean? We'd like to take a look in your backyard and your house to make sure he's not at home. Sorry, I'm not entertaining house guests today, especially ones who assume I'm lying. We can come back with a warrant, Mr. O'Sullivan, Detective Fagles said, speaking up for the first time. I turned my head to glare at him. I'm well aware, Detective. If you'd like to waste your time, go right ahead. My dog is not here, nor will he be here if you come back. Why are you looking for my dog anyway? What led you to my door? We're not at liberty to discuss details of the investigation, Jimenez said. It sounds like a pretty good one. Colonel Mustard did it in the park with the wolfhound, huh? I can hardly believe you'd be checking every single wolfhound owner in the valley. If you heard I still had a wolfhound from my neighbor across the street, he's not exactly a reliable witness. Last night he was cited by Officer Benton of the Tempe PD for making a false 911 call. The two detectives exchanged a glance, and I knew that was it. Mr. Submergian was at it again. I'd have to ask Oberon to leave him a present on his front doorstep. He'd do it camouflage too, so that even if Mr. Submergian was watching, and he probably would be, it would appear to be undeniable physical evidence that sometimes shit just happens. Have you checked the animal shelter for your lost dog, Mr. O'Sullivan? Jimenez asked. Fagles went back to glaring at me from behind his sunglasses. Not yet, I said. Aren't you concerned about his welfare? Of course I am. He's properly licensed and has my phone number on a tag around his neck. I'm expecting a call any minute. They stared at me stone-faced for a few moments to let me know that the sarcasm wasn't appreciated. I stared back to let them know I wasn't intimidated. Your move, youngsters. I could tell they didn't quite know what to make of me. Seeing the world through a perk filter as they did, I must look to them like a sullen stoner punk pretending to attend college. But I wasn't behaving like one. I was too alert, too sharp. Maybe that made me a dealer. Perhaps they assumed I wasn't letting them in because they'd find my hydroponic weed operation and psychedelic mushrooms in the closet. Or maybe a 3-foot-tall bong made of blown glass and day-glow hippie colors sitting on the coffee table. Finally, Jimenez broke the silence. He gave me a business card and said, "We'd like you to call us if you find your dog." I took the card and slipped it into my pocket without looking at it. "Good day, gentlemen," I said, giving them a broad hint to get the hell off my porch. Jimenez took the hint, but Fagels remained. Apparently he wanted to have a staring contest or mutter a threat to me. What an idiot. I knew how to be patient. I put my hands in my pockets and flashed him a fake smile. That got a reaction. He uncrossed his arms, pointed a finger at me, and said, "We'll be watching." Please, whatever. I kept on smiling and said nothing. Jimenez paused in the street and turned around, that being the point where he was supposed to realize Fagels hadn't followed him off the porch. "Detective Fagels, we have other people to talk to," he called. What a lovely straight line. Keeping his voice pitched for my ears only, Fagels said, "Yeah, like the judge." God's below, did this routine work on anyone? With one last aggressive clenching of his jaw, Fagels turned and stepped off the porch. As he did, he turned his head toward the east side of the lawn, where all the pink grass was. Just looking around. No reaction. The grass probably didn't look pink through those tinted sunglasses of his. Good job, Detective. Jimenez was oblivious as well. He was watching me to see if my body language screamed, "Guilty!" Then he strolled unhurriedly to their unmarked Crown Victoria once Fagels had caught up. I returned inside once they had driven off, and Oberon nuzzled my hand at once. "I was quiet," he said, very pleased with himself. I chuckled and scratched him behind the ears. "Yes, you were. Genghis Khan would have admired your craftiness." I lifted the camouflage off him so that he would feel comfortable, and then I sat back down to a half-eaten lukewarm omelet and a cup of coffee I had to warm up to make palatable. After cleaning up, I set about looking for anything the cops would find incriminating should they come here with a warrant. They would be supposedly searching for a dog, but that wouldn't stop them from snooping around either, unless I had a lawyer here. Even then, they might stumble across something or damage something in the process of their search that I didn't want them to, mostly my books. I had some pretty arcane titles behind glass in my study, with paper so old it was ready to crumble. Cops wouldn't be gentle with those if they wanted to rifle through them. I'd need to pay Hal $350 an hour to camp here and make sure they didn't look for Oberon inside my books. What a pain in the ass. Well, they should owe me some time after all that blood I gave Leaf last night.
Wayfair's Labor Day clearance. Save up to 70% off now through September 3rd at Wayfair.
Yes!
People everywhere are recommending GoodRx.
My neighbor showed me the app. It's helped me save on my kids' allergy pills.
GoodRx can save you a lot of money. Americans everywhere are sharing the savings. It's all set. Save up to 80% on your prescriptions with GoodRx. Download the free app.
What makes a carnival vacation fun? A little bit of everything for everyone. Like being this far above sea level and this deep in relaxation. With your very own spot to admire the view. And dozens of places to share a meal. Dishing up delicious food from some familiar faces. So no matter what you choose, no one does fun like Carnival.
That battle had taken much less than an hour, and the cleanup lasted maybe another. So I should be paid up for 10 hours already. Speaking of blood, I put the scrap of paper with Radomiwa's blood on it inside an old collection of stories about the Fianna, and locked it away in the glass bookcase in my study. To be safe, I camouflaged my herbs in the backyard so it looked like I had nothing along my fence but empty shelves. No telling what the cops would think about all the plant life back there. They'd probably assume some of it must be illegal and confiscate the lot of it to have it analyzed, and I'm sure it would come back to me half dead or worse. Fagels would do it just to get back at me for staring him down. While it was a load of inconvenience, I couldn't get myself too angry with them. They were only doing their jobs, and after all, I really was the bad guy in this case. Or at least Oberon was. Satisfied that I had hidden what needed hiding, I put in a call to Hal on his cell phone and explained my extraordinary needs for a Sunday. If Jimenez could get a warrant on Sunday, and I could get a lawyer. Hal said he'd send over a junior associate to guard the castle. Is he a pack member? I asked. Yes. Does that matter? Just tell him to keep a sharp ear and nose out. If one of my pantheon is behind this, then there might be some magical skullduggery going on. The police might bring someone along who isn't entirely human, for example. They probably won't show up at all. I never heard of a search warrant for a dog. Maybe the most paranoid man I've ever met. I'm certainly the longest lived you've ever met. Point taken. I'll tell him. I showered and dressed, cast camouflage back on Oberon, and slung Frogera across my back. I was anxious to visit the widow's house and make sure she was okay. Nothing looked amiss from the street. The blood had washed away or soaked into the asphalt sufficiently. Going around to the back, I saw nothing, not so much as a disturbed patch of ground. With a shudder, I considered the likelihood that the morgue had emptied. Shaking my head to clear the grisly image, I walked back to the front, Oberon panting softly behind me. I knocked on the widow's front door, and she answered after a minute, looking spry and chipper.
Ah, my dear boy Atticus. 'Tis a pleasure to see ye again. That's no line. Have you killed any more Brits for me?
Good morning,